Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to yet another very special bonus episode of Crime Over Wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and this week I am joined by two very, very, very special guest co-hosts. We have a great episode, very, very special episode for you all, because I know that you all care about this case, the story that we're talking about this week, very, very well, and you all care about it so much. I am joined first off by a very good friend of mine, to become a very good friend, my friend Joseph Fenity. Hello, Joseph. Thanks so much for coming on.
Liam, thank you for having me. And I gotta say, we're coming up on the new year. The fact that I never get invited back. The fact that I'm invited back is huge. I can't believe you and I have been, I don't know how long you and I have been going back and forth here,
Oh
Liam,
my
but
gosh.
I know that 6 years is the grand total at the end of the day, but
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, you and I have gotten to know each other very, very well over the last year or so,
yeah.
because we've been talking about a very special woman. And speaking of that very special woman, we have a very special person in that woman's life, Betty's life, with us this week. I am honored to be able to welcome Stephanie Walker, who is Betty's daughter, onto the podcast. So, hello, Stephanie. Thank you so much for coming on this week.
Hello, how are you guys? Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much for doing this, Stephanie. And I know that you and Joseph know each other very, very well because you've gotten to know each other a lot over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
right? And so I am just really honored to welcome you into the Crime Vineyard. I have to say, every time I talk about Crime Over Wine with friends, the first person that comes out of anybody's mouth is Betty Willis,
Wow.
your mother. And so I feel like I've gotten to know her. I feel like I know you, even though this is the first time we're
Yeah.
talking. And so I'm just really excited to be able to talk to you more about your mother this
All
week.
right, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone being so interested into her. Seem like they're more interested in her music and everything now that she's gone. I mean, there were a lot of people still
Mm.
interested when she was alive, but this is just like mind blowing. It's really exciting to hear how many people really care and really were interested into her music and just her as a person. And Joseph, he's my brother from another mother. I always tell him he's the new family member.
That's right. That's right. Liam, I called Stephanie long before the LA Magazine article came out, where I interviewed Stephanie, and we became brother and sister immediately.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, Stephanie, I don't even know what year that was because your mother passed in 2018. That's when we lost Betty
Hmm.
Willis. I think I might have reached you. It wasn't 2019, it was 2020. But you guys, Crime Over Wine peeps and Liam, you guys all have to understand. Stephanie, and I have been at this. That Los Angeles Magazine article didn't get printed till like what was it, Stephanie? Like mid
Yeah.
2022 or something
Something
like
like
that.
that.
So Stephanie and I have been kind of going back and forth. She's been waiting on she'll tell you, but she's been waiting on the justice system. I've been waiting on, traction on this. Just she and I, both both just connected by one woman, trying to just get people to hear about Betty Willis. And but yeah, Stephanie, it's been a journey, hasn't it?
Oh wow, a real long journey, but it's also been great because I've met a lot of new people like Joseph and other people
Mm.
along the way. So it's made it a little bit more, the journey not so hard, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and that because you said something interesting to me, Stephanie, before about about your mother's music, and that's one of the things that have touched me throughout this whole
Hmm.
process. Is that it seems as though the silver lining here, if there is one, right,
Hmm.
is that people are finally hearing your mother's voice for the first time when it seemed as though no one was hearing your mother's voice for a very, very long time. Does that feel like a little bit of of a again, if there is a gold lining or a silver lining in this whole thing, does that feel like that's it?
Um, Kind of, sort of. I mean, throughout my life, people have walked up and they're like, "Hey, Betty, I heard your music," or "It's been a while," So all throughout my life, I've had people come up. I mean, just before she passed, there was a guy. Came up. He gave her all kind of music. He was just so excited, like, "Oh yeah, I know you." So it's like give or take. She's always had these fans, but
Mm.
they kind of been tucked away. And it seemed like once this happened to her, it just kind of blew up, and everyone just came out all over the world. You know, I just see all
Mm.
kind of messages and things like that. So yeah, I kind of, in a way, I'm like, she didn't get her stardom here, you know, but she has it now. I kind of feel that way. Like, you know, she's a star in heaven.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And also, for anyone who's listening to this episode right now who hasn't listened to, Betty Willis's story, go back. It's Betty Willis, the soul singer. It's one of the first episodes we put out
Mhm.
to give you a little bit of an idea of how long we've been talking about Betty. But I'm also wondering, Stephanie, I mean, did you know all of your mother's music like the back of your hand?
Of
Like
course.
we all do now.
Oh yeah, I told Joseph I used to go to rehearsals. I used to be there, fall asleep. I used to
Mm,
be there listening to them practice for hours and hours till, like, you know, I got older, and then I'm like, I don't want to go. I have my own friends, you know, when you're a kid, you have your own friends. But yeah, I was always there. When I was younger, I was always
yeah.
there.
Stephanie, you said you remember the tapes, right?
hmm
The reel to reel
Yeah, my
tapes, and
mom had a reel to reel in our house, so she used to practice a lot. She had all her, you know, the
Wow.
microphone. She had everything. Yeah, so there's times she showed me how to work the reel to reel, go in there, do the tape, and wind it, and how to record and everything. So yeah, she was always musical throughout the house. So if she wasn't practicing, like if they had a gig or if they were going to play in a club or something like that or whatever, she was always singing. I don't care if she was washing
Mm.
dishes, mopping the floor. She was always singing. Yeah. That's why I always
Mm.
say that was my songbird. I have my own songbird. You know, I could wake up in the morning on Saturdays, and if she was up early, she would be in there cooking. She would be singing, humming, singing, you know, different melodies, like, you know, kind of like a singer practicing their voice and seeing how high their pitch could go. And I would come in and she would tell me to sing. I'm like, nah. I
Mm.
sound like a cat. No.
I feel that.
Yeah, I didn't get that talent.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. I that town also skipped a generation for me as
Yes,
well. So I
yes.
relate to that very much so.
I think I can sing like Betty Willis. I'm just not willing to, do it in
Well,
public.
I have
I
to
sing,
hear
Right.
that. I'll have to be the judge of that. I need to hear that.
hmm in private. I'll call you later, Stephanie. But I think that was the cool thing though, Stephanie, about your mom's voice was that, especially that act naturally. I think one of the best of, or will be the best of Betty at some point,
Hmm.
because anyone can sing along to that, right? And it's just like
Yeah.
she makes you feel. She takes you there.
Yeah.
She just takes you
Well, my
there. But
mom's music,
yeah.
how she started, it was never like soul or you know, blues. She started with country western because that's all they had on the radio.
Mm.
So that's why a lot of her music is kind of more like slow and understanding, and you can sing along with it. And then, you know, as time went, she started getting into different other sounds and stuff like that. But overall, yeah, my mom's music, we still sing it. Sometimes when I hear it, I cry. Sometimes I don't, you know. It's when I'm
Mm.
missing her, I'll play her music a lot. So, yeah,
Mm.
everyone
Yeah.
loves my mom's music. Everywhere I
Yeah.
go, they're like, "Oh man." There's people that did know, like family on my husband's side that didn't know, and they were like, "I didn't know your mom was a singer. You didn't tell me." I'm like, "Well, she was my mom. That's just how I saw her. I didn't see her like, oh, she's a
Mm.
singer, she's a star or whatever. She's my mom."
What do we not know about your mother yet, Stephanie? I mean, is there something you can kind of tell us a little bit more about what she was like? That would kind of give us a little bit more of a look into who she was as a person.
Um, my mother was one of those type of persons that when you meet her, you just fall in love with her instantly because just the conversation, she was very intelligent. She could tell you stories and tell you things. You would be like, oh, wow. And you could sit there and talk to her for hours. She was very kind hearted. She'd take her shirt off her back. She would give it to anybody in need, anyone she could
Mm.
help. She was just a very sweet person, you know, very sweet person. So
Mm.
very talented in other ways. My mom used to sew. She used to make clothes for me. So she had other talents, you know. She used to play the guitar. That was her thing she was trying to get into, but then she stopped. So her main thing was she wanted to learn different music instruments. She loved music and she would love to be like versatile to learn just different things. So she would love to listen to any kind of music. I don't care if it was Middle Eastern or if it was from a whole nother planet. She just loved music. And she loved people. She
Mm.
loved to conversate with people from different cultures, different countries, just to, you know, She just loved people. So overall, she's the only thing I could say. She just was a good person. She had a lot of talents, hidden talents people didn't know about. But overall, her singing was her best talent.
And they're learning about it now,
Yeah.
Stephanie. Isn't
Mm.
that kind of like Liam was saying? What silver lining, if any, is
Hmm.
there? And it's, she's still singing. Like, we still get to hear that voice, and it still goes on. And it's that's kind of, I guess, the it does not bring back your mom, but people get to hear that voice, and that's kind of
Yeah.
that's a special thing.
So it kind of makes it seem like she's still living in a way, you know what I mean, through her
Mm.
voice. If you hear it, and then it just makes me think, oh my God, let me call her. Then I'm like, I can't. So yeah, in a way, it's kind of like a silver lining for us.
When I went to La Amiga Fabric Store, and again, everyone who remembers the one of the first episodes, first season of Liam's Crime Over Wine, we all know the fabric
Hmm.
store. And what was interesting is that the owner, Jerry Rodriguez, at first he didn't want to talk to me. He's
Yeah.
like, "What the heck are you doing here? Why do you want to talk about this thing? I have a whole bunch of what's going on." And um, at the very end, after we talked for a bit. I told him, thanks for talking to me about Betty. And then before I walked away, I went back over to him. I said, "Why did you finally decide to talk to me? What made you open up? Because you really opened
Hmm.
up." And he said, the thing is, he said, he had recently lost a family member
Hmm.
at that time, and he said that he missed Betty so much, and he realized that he feels that people really only pass on when you stop talking about
Hmm.
them.
Mm.
And he said he wanted to keep talking about Betty because that's what was keeping her alive in his heart and his
Hmm.
mind. And so I feel that's Stephanie, you and I, hey, that I'm not working on the Betty Willis story
Hmm.
anymore, you guys. But Stephanie and I still text. Why?
Hmm.
Because we're still talking about
Yeah.
Betty,
Mm.
and that's what Liam's doing here too. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of add that because that was something that I feel happens with music and with just saying someone's name, saying their name,
Mhm.
singing their name, so they kind of live
Oh
on.
yeah.
Mm.
We all talk about her all the time. We always make jokes like times when we went somewhere and my mom was making a joke about something. We try to think about all the happy times we had with her and we just all start cracking up. It gets hard around the holidays. Like I said, this new year, I don't really celebrate it anymore because it's just like it brings up bad memories for me. So I just
Yeah.
go think of it as another day, spend it with family. Like we're gonna do like a sit-in, the grandkids and my daughters and stuff. We're gonna do like movie night and just hang out. We got a karaoke machine for Christmas, so okay, now we're all gonna
Uh
try
oh.
to
Uh oh. Here.
sing.
Uh oh.
Yeah.
Don't give Liam your address. Don't give Liam your
Oh,
address.
that's okay. The more merrier. That's how we see it. We just love having fun. So, that we feel like that keeps her kind of alive too. Just her knowing that, because
Mm.
her main thing was always like, when I die, I don't want anyone sad. I want everyone to be happy and enjoy life. I don't want you sitting around depressed. And that's how I try to keep living my life like that because we were always smiling
Mm.
and happy and just enjoying life. So. I
Mm.
try to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, and it seemed like that's how she lived too, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that from just from what I know about your mother already.
yeah, she did. She
Yeah.
never planned anything because she's like, you never promised, another day. So she always looked at,
Mm.
if I'm here tomorrow, then we'll go and we'll do this, we'll do that. One thing about her, she was very active. She wasn't one of those like older, like, oh, and she had knee surgery and everything, and she still
Mm.
kept going. When I went to pick my mom up in the hospital and she had her knee surgery, just walking around, I'm like, I was shocked. I was like, what are you doing on your leg? I'm like, doesn't that hurt? She's like, no, they wanted me. She's like, and she goes, these guys over here are wimps. And they were younger, like a younger guy and another there because they needed them to get up and walk. She's like, they don't want to get up and walk. She's like, I think at the time when she had the surgery, she's like 69. She's like, I didn't have knee surgery. I'm older than them and I'm up walking around. I'm like, are you ready to go? She's like, yep. And she walked right out of that hospital. And that I was like, oh wow, I got to be like her when I'm older.
Oh yeah. She's tough, huh?
Yeah. very tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, Stephanie, I want to go back to about 6 years ago, from when this everyone's going to be hearing this episode, January 1st, 2018, and I mean, do you remember, where were you when you found out what happened to your mom?
I was at home. I was at home
Yeah.
and I got a phone call. And it was so weird because I told Joseph I had just went and see my mom. Probably had been like maybe 5 hours. And I was like, well, Mom, you want to come home with me? And she
Mm,
was like, no. I'm like, come on. She was with her friends hanging out. And, I was like, okay, well, I'll be back in a few hours. So that was my plan. And then like maybe around 7 that morning, I got a call from my cousin. And she works at the community center that's around the corner, the Trip Community Center. And she was like, they think that is my mom. They weren't for sure, but she told me to just come. So I left my house in Corona and I sped all the way to Santa Ana and got there. And at first they didn't want to really stay, but then they finally was like, yeah, it was, it was my mom. So
mm.
that was like the day I died, I feel.
And I mean, and they, caught the guy right off the bat, right? I mean, was that a little relieving?
Yeah, he was hiding. Yeah, when they pulled up, and I thank God for the lady, and I still never been able to thank her because she left out of the court, and because she was a witness. So I still don't know where she lives or anything, but they're going to be giving me the info soon. But they got there in time, Santa Ana PD, and he was hiding behind one of the pillars. There's like the pillars of the building, and he was trying to hide. And then they were trying to get him to come out. And then he tried to run, jump the fence, and they caught him and put him in cuffs and arrested him. So, but by then they tried to bring my mom back, work on my mom, but I guess there's a bone in your neck that he crushed. So there was no coming back from that. I'm really thankful they caught him though, because what if he would have jumped the fence, got away? What if the lady wouldn't have called and she heard the scream? So it's a lot of what ifs. So I'm
Mm,
just really thankful that someone did call, because a lot of times people ignore it and they don't, it's nothing.
mm.
And then the next day they're like, oh, wow, so I'm thankful for that.
Well, and so then a long time passed, right? And then you got a call from our friend Joseph. And so I guess I'm wondering, first of all, how much time had passed while, and what was happening in that time period, I guess, while we were all still trying to, you know, push this forward through the justice system.
Well, in that time period, it was a language barrier, so they say, but we all know that was a big lie, not with on the legal side, on his side.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the biggest thing, us getting an interpreter. So that's, then COVID hit. So that really set it back. And we were
Mm,
doing virtual court, but they just kept continuing it. And then that's when I remember Joseph reaching out. I was a little skeptical because I'm like, I've had dealt with a lot of reporters and I told Joseph the way they more were concerned about why was my mom homeless or why this. They weren't seeming to be
mm,
more concerned about her death and who she was as a person. So I was skeptical, but then me and him got to talking and I felt a little more comfortable. And then we started working together and he started, getting it out there too. And I was putting more pressure on the DA, but it was hard because you have detectives that are involved. One of them caught COVID. He was very sick. He almost died. Then you had officers that needed to come in and they needed to testify, but they had to be out on some kind of training things and stuff. So the schedules were just crazy. So finally, COVID ended and then we're like, we're going to have a court date and we were ready to go. But then um, they couldn't get the interpreter out. So mainly the issue of why it was kind of prolonging a lot was the interpreter. And then twice they changed up, or was it twice? 3 times they changed his lawyer. So when the lawyer changed over, we got to do new discovery. That puts it off. We have to. So basically, it's been a bunch of BS, I think.
And
mm.
yeah, and about mainly a bunch of BS, mostly a bunch of BS, and also think about, you know what I mean, and also think about all of the things that happen in life when time, when so much, Betty, Betty was killed on in the very first hours of the very first day of 2018.
Hmm.
And we've got 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. I mean, just like Stephanie says, uh, different, so many things can happen in a short period of time. Then when you extend stuff, it's like, okay, now there wasn't a global health emergency when Betty was killed.
Right.
I mean, it's just so many things happen. I don't know if this is making sense what I'm saying, but it's like the more
Hmm.
time you wait, the more time a justice system is delayed, anything, the more you put something off, the more chances for excuses, BS or non BS, to happen. And I think when I saw Stephanie and the rest of her family in the courthouse in Santa Ana, California in 2023, I think it was 2023, yes. I couldn't believe, I mean, Stephanie and I have met before and we talked on the phone a lot. I just couldn't believe we were sitting there.
Hmm.
Could you, Stephanie? I couldn't
No.
believe it was actually happening.
I mean, when I got up that morning, I had butterflies. I was just thinking, this is really happening? Are they going to call me and say, oh, no, this is not going to happen? Then I'm going to, well, I had already flipped out the week before on them. So they were already kind of like, she's on edge. Yeah, I had told them off a little bit,
Hmm.
like, this is ridiculous. This is going on almost 6 years. This has been 5 years and a half, and we're still sitting here, with this interpreter. How can you guys keep going on that when you already knew he did an interview for 45 minutes speaking Spanish? So what are we waiting on? So I think with the pressure of Joseph putting it out there and me on them like a bulldog, that's why they were like, yeah, we need to. And then at that time too, the judge was he was like, okay, I'm getting sick of this. You guys need to figure it out, because we were ready to go. We were just waiting on the defense.
Well, and in terms of the delay here, because my impression of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, either of you two here, if you disagree with this, was it was kind of twofold, right? Where it was like the one part of, potentially someone of a community that is, typically underserved in terms of, your mother being, homeless, experiencing homelessness at the time of her death. But then also, I feel like there's like the other part of like the fact that it was kind of this ironclad, open shut case
Hmm.
of, they had so much evidence against him
Hmm.
that almost seemed to me to be the possible other side of maybe why this took so long. Do you agree with that, Stephanie?
Um, yeah, in a way, no, because I just felt like, hey, if you had all this evidence, you caught the guy. I mean, what are we waiting on? It doesn't make any
Mm,
sense. And like they said, well, we have to do due process. We got to make sure he has right legal, he understands. And that was our fight. He does understand. But, this United States, we have to make sure everybody gets legal representation and the right, and they're represented the right way with all the laws because in the early case, they did try to get it dismissed. They tried to say that we violated his due process. We didn't tell them in time for the arraignment,
mm,
which the judge was like, no, we did. Because one thing we did is we tried to make sure we did everything slowly and at first. So we made sure everything was done right and they wouldn't come back and try to use that tactic like, oh, yeah,
mm.
they didn't represent him right, whatever. But it didn't work. So I'm feeling like within the second year period, this guy should be going to trial. I mean, I've seen people that murdered someone and went to trial within a few months and got convicted. Why?
Right,
Because it was a
right.
high profile
Yeah,
case? That doesn't make any sense.
that's right. That's
Right.
right. And ones that Stephanie's absolutely right. And suspects that were not caught in the moment, they were not caught on camera.
Hmm.
And I'll
Hmm.
go a little bit further than Stephanie's going with this, and I'll tell you what I've learned. And I did not believe this a few years ago with Betty's case, or maybe I shouldn't say I didn't believe it. I did not know it to be a fact, but I've come to the conclusion, especially in this last year, throughout 2023 and I guess part of 2022, they didn't care. And if they did care about Betty, I promise you they didn't care enough.
Hmm.
That was my big takeaway. And I was very apprehensive early on in saying anything like that.
No, but that's true. Me and you talked about it, and that's true. And that's how I
Yeah.
felt like, because if you think about it, they started off saying transient, first, and then they went to homeless woman.
Mm,
And then once we started getting all the, little, I guess Joseph putting it out there and getting into pressure, the DA was feeling like, okay, she's being known. This case is starting to get a little known. It's like, okay, now you want to change it up and say, okay, soul singer killed by a homeless man. That's why I was like,
mm,
that's weird to me.
Yeah, they put out Stephanie's referring to the press release that the Orange County District Attorney's Office put out a, a 24 hours after the conviction that took 5 years, and suddenly it was like,
wow.
killer. So we go from transient woman, homeless woman murdered in Santa Ana, Happy New Year. Then we go to a press release after they get the conviction, and the press release says, murder of Betty Willis put away for life, and you might know Betty from this song and that
Mhm.
song, and
Yeah.
Mm,
and all suddenly it's so I will tell you every single step of the way, and Stephanie knows this, Liam, I text you all my stuff in between my notes and my reporting, but every step of the way I gave I not I gave, but there were opportunities for people to tell me or show me or tell Stephanie or show Stephanie that they cared. And again, I know that there were people that Stephanie and her family worked with on this case. I'll let Stephanie speak to it, who, they did want to get justice for Betty. And they do love Betty. But I'm talking as a whole, the officials I encountered, I'm talking more on the district attorney's side, more on the Orange County side, not necessarily investigators and police force who did their job and did a great job.
Mhm.
But I just got the sense over and over that it was just it wasn't important enough. It wasn't
mm,
it just wasn't a priority.
That's how I felt too. I felt like it wasn't a priority because they kept using that she was homeless woman. But then when they see that,
yeah.
it started getting a little more like, okay, it's been in the news, it's been on the news, it's in this paper, it's been on this podcast. Then they're starting to be like, oh, okay. And then they're like, their daughter is just like snapping at us like a snapping turtle every time she talks because I'm
Mm,
like, what's the delay? And then when we were supposed to go in June of this year, 2023, we were supposed to start trial June. Here comes the excuse. Oh, you know what? The interpreter retired and he moved to Guatemala. I was like, I just
mm,
had to laugh. Like, are you
You
freaking
can't make this stuff
serious?
up. Exactly.
Like, really?
yeah.
I was
And
like,
that goes back
Mm,
to what I said, right? About how if you let enough time pass with anything in life,
mhm.
just stuff gets away. Everything. People
yeah.
start
Right.
dying. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, people retire, people die, people move, and it's like, uh, and that's a lack of respect to Betty Willis, and that's a lack of respect to the state of California. That's a lack of respect to America's justice system. Oh, we'll get to it when we get to it. No,
Mhm.
me and my boring New Year's resolutions, those are, I'll get to it when I get to it. But
Right.
when you're talking about the life and soul and everything that Betty Willis is and was, you know, someone was murdered on our streets. Stephanie's mom was taken away. Stephanie's mother, grandmother,
Great grandmother.
great grandma. Let's get on this. Let's get on this.
Mm. Yeah, and you even were talking a little bit about that too, Joseph, on this podcast and in some of your writings too, about how you've been asked so many times, well, why do you care about this case? So, this is this can't be that that important to a music reporter, which is what you were at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I that seems to be like the theme throughout this whole thing, is that no one really acknowledged, at least from maybe not no one, but certainly not the people who were the decision makers in this whole thing, really acknowledged that they were dealing with like Joseph was saying, a mother, a grandmother, a great mother, a great grandmother, a daughter, a person, that's has always
That's my
struck
thing.
me.
She's a person. So this is how you would
Yeah.
treat human life. That it could be anyone, not just my mom. That's how you would treat
Mm,
someone. That's how you would
yeah.
honor them as especially I could see if they didn't have the evidence. I could see if they were looking for this guy. They just
Sure.
found her. She's dead on the street. Don't have any clue whatsoever, but they have everything. They had everything.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
Everything
was
to me,
so,
giving them the phone that they
yeah.
didn't find, right, Joseph?
Can you tell Liam, do you mind if we hijack your podcast for a minute?
Oh, hijack away.
Stephanie, pour me a glass of wine. Pour me and Liam a glass of wine. I think one of the most interesting and telling and entertaining and sad parts of the whole story is what happened within just an hour or two of Betty's murder. I don't know how many people know about this. Will you take us back to that morning, Stephanie, and the evidence that, I mean, investigator Stephanie? Can you talk about that?
Well, after they made us wait for my mom, because we were like, I was demanding, like, I gotta see her, gotta see her. So they were like, okay, well, let us do our little investigation and let forensics. So then they let me go over there to get my mom's stuff and all her belongings. And my daughter was like, Mom, this doesn't look like grandma's, because we knew her stuff. We knew all, because I took my mom shopping. So I'm like, she doesn't even wear that type of jacket. So I'm like, okay, let me look in the jacket. I looked in the jacket. There was a phone. I tried to turn the phone on. The phone wouldn't turn on. So I went to my car. I plugged it up and waited like probably like about 5 minutes as we were still gathering our stuff. Went back to the phone, turned it on. As soon as I turned it on, it's a picture of the guy that killed my mom and a girl. And I kind of start scrolling through the pictures and looking. I'm like, okay, this is this guy's phone. So I walk in there and I give it to the detective in the fabric store. Like, you guys missed this, and this must have been his jacket that he had on, and I guess he just laid it on there on my mom's
Mm.
property or whatever. I don't know how it got on there, but they missed that. And I was like,
That's
how did you
huge.
miss that?
Well, I don't even know where to begin with that. First of all, but I
Yeah,
am, my initial question is, I mean, it seems as though that set the scene for the next, what would become the next
that's
five and
right.
a half years of
That's
your
right.
life, Stephanie.
Mhm.
I mean, what even goes through your mind at that point when you're staring at this dude's jacket?
Well, because at the time I didn't know, they said they had caught the guy and they had him in custody. So I never knew what he
Mm-hmm.
looked like. So now I'm like, okay, this must be the guy that killed my mom. Like,
Wow.
wow. And I'm like looking at my daughter. I'm like, you mean to tell me that the police detectives, the forensic didn't see this? So I was just kind of baffled, like, wow. So I just felt like it was important to give it to him. But I also was like, that was kind of something that they overlooked, that they went through all her
Yeah.
belongings, everything. So
Yeah.
it seemed like they would have found that.
Did they give you any sort of excuse as to how they missed that, or was it just we
No,
just
the
pass it
look
over?
was like, oh my God, how did we miss that? Like, shock.
Wow.
That's
Mm,
how it was for me.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so and then over the next and we talked about, the reasons why, you think, Stephanie, why this took so long and the delay after delay after delay. Did you get any, like, absent the translation issues that we've been having, alleged translation issues we've been having about in regards to the perpetrator here, the convicted murderer? I guess I'm wondering, if because we all know that that's BS. We've said it before. But I'm wondering if what kind of excuse, they gave in terms of, knowing that he spoke Spanish, but not, being able to do that. Did they seem to know that that was, not 100% true?
Yeah. I mean, on our side, as far as everybody on our side, we all know, even the officers, the detectives, the ones that interviewed him, we all knew that, okay, this guy, he spoke, he understood, and they asked him several times that he understood. He also
Mm-hmm.
spoke Spanish back to them. So everyone knew on our side. But on the defense side, they have to get, if he's saying, hey, I don't understand, to me, that was his ploy. I mean, that's what people do when they go to
Okay.
jail. Like, we got to figure out a way to try to stall this, or, maybe they'll dismiss it and I can get out or something. I don't know. But to me, that was just their little ploy or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But they knew this guy understood Spanish, and they knew that this language is very, very rare. They don't even have any interpreters. The one two
Mm-hmm.
they have is one for the FBI that did come, because at first she wasn't going to even come. So then we were stuck. So they have to keep that in mind. The other guy, he retired. He had been kind of hanging in the loop, waiting around for 5.5 years, and finally, I guess he retired. So then the only other person in the United States of America that speaks this dialect was an FBI interpreter. And at that time, she wasn't sure she wanted to even come do it. And she was out in
Mm,
Texas. So we were like, oh, wow, what are we
And
going to do?
and again, guys, that was part, we all know that was part of the game, part of the
Mhm.
defense, part of the
right.
game was let's hold, the longer we can hold this out, maybe Stephanie will move. Maybe
Mm.
Joseph Fenity will get bored and move on to something else. Wrong. Maybe Liam will stop drinking red wine. If we wait,
Also wrong.
also wrong.
Yeah.
But if we wait long enough, maybe, and it started to happen. It really did. It started to get a little bit scary, I think. I,
Mhm.
I
Mm,
think Stephanie would share in this, where it's like, oh my God, like the two people who they could bring in to speak this language, now one is gone. One of the detectives was no longer in the force, or he was out very ill, whatever.
Mhm.
Can I add one more thing about that cell phone? I just, as you guys were talking,
Mhm.
the suspect's cell phone, the evidence that Stephanie single handedly found. I just want to point out that, the reason that cell phone was overlooked is because it's because of where Betty Willis lived and how Betty lived. I really think that it wouldn't have been overlooked in a Beverly Hills mansion. I just you know what I mean. When we get back to the it's like Betty did not have a real fancy
Mhm.
bedroom and bedside table and whatever. There was a shopping cart next to Betty, and that's where she kept her stuff, and that was her thing. So you've got people walking into this January 1st, middle of the night, going, okay, well, okay, so this person has passed away and this person's a suspect. All right, what are we going to do next? They didn't, from square one, it just wasn't taken.
They didn't care.
mm,
Just say that. They
There you
didn't
go.
care.
There you go.
I'm
Just say
just
it.
gonna
Yeah.
tell it
Yeah.
for you. They didn't care because it felt like she was homeless and they just didn't care. And you can
Right.
never judge a
mm,
book by its cover because you never know what anyone's background is or what the
right.
situation is. And no one should treat anyone like that. I don't care what their situation is or what's going on in their life. Everyone's human being and we all should have a little bit more compassion for each other than the way to me, the way they did it, it was like, well, another homeless person, another dad. Oh, well, let's just go.
Mm. Yeah, another one for the books,
Hmm.
right? I mean that because I
Mm-hmm.
mean I hear
Mm-hmm.
you hear about about that fairly often in terms of what you're referring to here, but very rarely I feel like do you ever really see that actively play out in terms of like I feel like this is a really good like your mother's case, right, is a really good representation of that where it was there. It was like right there for them to put this guy away, close the books, have another point in their column,
Hmm.
and they just to me anyways again it just felt like they wouldn't do it.
To me, the only thing they were happy about is like, okay, we did one for the books that we caught him. We don't
That's
have
right.
to put
That's
this
right.
in all this time and manpower out there to go look for this guy now. So we do have him. So
Mm.
we're done. Moving on.
Well, talking about people, caring and not caring, again, it seemed to me, anyways, again, just from reading the news coverage of your mother's death, up until Joseph Kennedy got involved, right? It seemed to me as though, Joseph was really the first person to kind of put,
Hmm.
a heart,
Hmm.
to this whole
Yeah,
thing.
that's why I always say that's my brother from another mother. Yeah, love Joseph. Yeah,
Yeah.
and his boyfriend.
What was it like to read what he was writing about your mom for the first
um,
time?
he was telling he was to me it was more like he was really putting the truth out, and he was really
Mm,
showing that she was a person. Like this is a person. What's taking so long? Why are you haven't got justice for this lady? And that's what I liked about it because everyone else they weren't concerned about that. They were just like it was
mm.
another story. Moving on. Like I said, that's how I felt always. Moving on.
Yeah. And what always sticks out to me, and gets me a little emotional about this whole, about, Joseph's article, about your mother's story, is that moment, and his name is escaping me, but your mother's coworker who recognized her voice.
Hmm.
Did you know that story before you read about it?
Yeah, because my mom came home one night and she's like, Steph. She was all excited. She's like, oh, you wouldn't believe that I was at work and I was just humming and this guy, he's like, oh, I know that song. And I was looking at her like, really? So when she told me his age, I was like, wow, because most people that age younger, they're not really into that type of music. So I was like, oh, that's cool, mom. And she's like, yeah, he said he's gonna bring me some records he has in mind and some music and all that. And I'm like, okay, cool, cool, cool. So we were all like excited and laughing about it, like, wow. And I was like, told you, mom. I always told you, mom, you a star. No matter if you didn't make it, but you think you're still a star. See, that's cool. And then I remember shortly after that, I don't know if it was a couple of days or whatever, she came home with all this music and she had all this, sheet music and CDs that he had. I was like, and their little 45s, I'm like, oh wow, that's cool. So yeah, she was really happy. Anytime someone would acknowledge her about her music, it really, like, what do you know about my music? That would make her like, what do you know? Because she didn't believe people would know because it was so long ago and it's more like oldies, you know what I mean? So, like, what do you know about it? But I've had so many people, even friends that listen to oldies, they're like, yeah, I didn't know that was your mom, and I'm like, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's my mom.
And it's been really interesting as the music, and again, thanks to her friend Anthony, who he's been one of the people early on who got Betty's music out there,
Mm-hmm.
and really that helped get the interest. Thank God Betty recorded
Right.
even one song. Thank God she recorded some music back in the day, back in the 60s, because and thank God it was discovered, and thank God Anthony put it up online, because that's what helped me in my story. Because I'm waving a flag trying to get everyone's damn attention. I'm trying to find something in Betty's life that can let them know that her life matters. And I'm, in the media, Liam, you're trying to find these little pieces so that you can, these little kind of sparkly pieces of life, so that you can say, hey, did you know, just to add interest and add momentum. And it was, that's what did it. It was really Betty's, and I've told Stephanie this. Now I'm going to cry, but I told Stephanie this, it's Betty's voice that saved her.
Mm-hmm.
And if
That's
it weren't
true.
for, right? And it was her voice at the end that saved her. Thank God that 911 caller did the right thing and became a 911 caller for those few minutes she was on with emergency dispatch in Santa Ana in 2018. But what did she hear? She heard Betty's voice. Thank God Betty spoke up for herself, because when Betty spoke out that night, it caught her killer. Betty caught her own killer. And then, of course, Stephanie was the investigator, because Stephanie got the cell phone, the evidence. But, and I'll tell you, the media I always talk about how, the media has done a disservice to the Betty Willis case. But the media was very interested for about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Remember that, Stephanie?
Yeah.
And
Right.
all the stations in LA, the second largest media market in the nation, they were all out there. They had live trucks out at La Amiga Fabric Store in Santa Ana. And they were all interested. You had some, I won't say her, and not that it matters, but this one reporter, she wanted the tape. She said, hey, I went to the owner of the fabric store. Hey, I heard that you have surveillance footage of the gruesome murder, and I'm paraphrasing, and can you give us some of that tape? And so the media was there for the drama and, that. And then, like the media does, it moves on, I guess, by design. And, what Stephanie opened up to me, and thank God you opened up to me, Stephanie, because you allowed me to write this Los Angeles Magazine piece and tell your mom's story. And I know that Stephanie messaged me. The story finally came out, and I was a little bit nervous, I thought the story was great, but I was like, I hope Stephanie, I wanted it to be right. And I got a text from Stephanie shortly after publication. And you know how when you see a message at first on your phone, and it's like, it's long, but you haven't read it yet. I'm like, I hope this is either good long or bad long. And so I looked at it, and I don't know if you remember, Stephanie, but if you don't mind me sharing some of it, I don't have it exactly, but it was like, the biggest compliment ever was you said you took me back to that morning, which really tells me that we were able to, together, you and I, two strangers, at least initially, we were able to paint very accurate picture of the morning we lost Betty, and also an accurate picture kind of what Betty's life was like, you know? So, and then of course there's Liam, who, thank God, he keeps calling me up saying, let's do, you know, 6 years later, let's make sure, you know, we remember Betty. Liam and his Crime Over Wine listeners have been awesome with, I mean, you know, making sure that Betty's voice is not forgotten.
That's awesome too, because it's like, wow, you know, at first it was like to me, I felt like they had forgotten about her in the beginning, because it was like, you know, like you said, the media was out there, then they're concerned, and I didn't really want to talk to them because the way they were to me, they weren't, I don't know, they weren't really concerned about her as a person. It was just more the crime and whatever, and trying to get that story. So yeah, and throughout the time that me and Joseph been speaking and getting whatever and putting it together, yeah, I could see that with him and me. That's why we're here now, because I don't think that if there would have been any little pressure from him, because they used to say, oh yeah, we have a guy that's been calling us, the reporter. Do you know him? His name is Joseph. Yes. I go, yeah, that's my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Look, Liam, listen to this. They started looking at us weird because, you know, I was never sitting where the press would normally sit.
Right.
They would see me at the beginning of these court hearings and just be me and, I mean, because we couldn't help but become friendly. Because it was me and Stephanie against the world. You know, it was the Betty Willis family and this one reporter that was, you know, determined to get all this on the record. And so I think they would kind of look at us a little bit weird because they'd be like, hey, isn't that the reporter? Why are they just sitting over there chatting and laughing? And I was like,
well, yeah, because they warned me. They go, well, you know, remember early off we were saying not to really speak with the media, you know, kind of, you know. I'm like, yeah, I know. I haven't really spoke with anyone. I'm like, they're like, yeah, we have this one guy named Joseph. I'm like, oh yeah, but Joseph, I speak with Joseph. I'm like, because with him, he's the one that's going to be getting this out there, because right now it's a slow process with you guys. You guys just keep continuing. That's all I ever get from you guys. It's like,
that's
you
right.
guys don't try to put any fire under the, like, hey, judge, we need this to go. What are we waiting on? They need to do it. It was never that. So yeah, as long as he's here,
that's right.
I go, that's my little pit bull over there. He's going to be on you guys.
Amen. That's right. We had no choice. That's right. And anyone, you know, at the Orange County DA's office who might come across this Crime Over Wine podcast, I'll just remind all of us, we know this. Stephanie was so patient for so long, and you can only ask a human being, you know, who's lost their mother to, you know, and she was so, I watched you, Stephanie, you were very well behaved and very patient, and you really rolled with it.
Very hard. I just wanted to
That's right.
know,
That's right.
there are times I wanted to jump over there and grab that guy. Especially his ending statement. I just, till today, it still irks me a little. Like, you know, I have a mom. I wouldn't want that to happen to my mom. And I don't even want to hear that, dude. So if you have a mom, why would you even do that? And you weren't even intoxicated. You weren't under the influence at all. So what is your excuse? So I don't even want to hear that.
Stephanie only tells the truth. Well, here's the deal, though. In conclusion, I'll just say, well, now I sound like I'm really in court. In conclusion, Your Honor. But really, I think, you know, because everyone impacted by this, it's all humans. We're all humans. Right. You know, we're all having these emotions. And, you know, Stephanie did an amazing job of just, you know, they said, okay, we'll get to it. After 5 years of hearing that, you know, you can only do so much. And again, even I mean, I was aware of certain case details that hadn't been made public, but had been leaked or released to me. And I did a really good job of giving them as much time as I thought appropriate. And then at some point, after the years had gone by, Stephanie and I looked at each other and it's like, you know, it's go time. Like you can't hold, you know, it would be irresponsible for me, you know this, Liam, it'd be irresponsible for a journalist to hold back on a story when it's ready to go. Like what, just because of the convenience of a district attorney's office? No,
right.
It's time to go. Time to tell the world about Betty.
Yeah, because my next thing, if we weren't going to get a court date to go to trial in September, I told Joseph my next thing is to make some signs, and I'm going to be picketing in front of the OC courthouse. So they need to be prepared. And he was like, oh yeah. So I guess I don't know if it was the man upstairs. It was like, yeah, we're going to get this rolling because I was going to be out there every day it took for them to get this trial started because it was just,
Mm,
to keep continuing it and continuing it. And it was really no really valid reasons. It was just like, oh, we're going to continue it for another 6 months, or another 4 months, or another 2 months. That was crazy. It was like a roller coaster.
yeah.
And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And to put my family and my kids and the grandkids through that, everybody's ready to go. Then I have to call them and say, hey, you know what? It's a no go. It's put off until another 6 months. And then I got the family. They're all in the phone like, what the heck? And cursing and that's not right. So yeah, it was like a big
Yeah.
chip off my shoulder in a way too, a relief. And especially for my mom's brother, because he's the last sibling. So he was the main one,
Mm,
like, what's going on? Why haven't they given justice for my sister? And he was really upset. So he was like,
yeah.
finally, it took them so long. And the question he asked me was, why did it take so long? And I'm like, I don't know. I really, truly don't know.
Mm,
I couldn't even tell you
yeah.
that. Just BS. That's all I could say.
That seems to be, and again, just from talking with you, Stephanie, just for a little while here, it seems like that is the, I mean, obvious, frustration here is that you just didn't know why it took, for sure why it took so
Right.
long. Am I right there?
Yes. Yes.
What would you say to, and again, I've been very intentionally not saying his name because who really cares, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, but your mother's murderer. I mean, what would you say to him if you got 5 minutes, to speak with him face to face?
Uh, there's no talking to him.
Hmm.
I know God says be forgiving, and maybe one day eventually I will, but right now I don't have that at all.
Hmm.
So it would be no
Hmm.
talking. Like I said, when he made the statement about, oh, he's very sorry, he has a mother, he would never want to wish that on his mother. Well, you did, because in my eyes, you did it to someone else's mother. You did it to a grandmother. I mean, even she's just an old lady. Who would do that to an old lady? Seriously. I mean, come on, that's a
Hmm.
sick person. So I have no feelings for him. I have no remorse for him, nothing. I'm numb when it comes to him.
Hmm.
So whatever happens to him happens to him. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
glad he got life in prison, but there's factors when you get to prison too that could happen. When people hear that you did that to an old lady. They have grandmothers and they have mothers in there too. And God forgive me right now for that, but that's just how I felt.
I think it was really tough when Stephanie and I would be in contact after each delay, because every time that this court system would delay justice for Betty Willis, I would it would seem to me like the Band-Aid was being ripped off of Stephanie
Yeah.
again and her family again. For me as a journalist, it was just another annoying delay, and it was like, oh darn, I was going to get this, whatever. But to see it just took such a toll on the family, right, Stephanie? It was just like, oh, here we go again.
Well, yeah, because it's like you're reliving it. You're reliving it every time you go. You're
Yeah.
bringing everything up. You're reliving it again, and then you have to tuck it back down and try to compress it and hold it and go with everyday life and keep moving on. But you still have that right there on your shoulder, and it's like, man, I got to get through the day with this. And then they'll call you like, hey, we're going to go to court. It's set for trial. And you're like, okay, cool. You're happy, like finally. And then here comes the text or the phone call again, like, no, unfortunately, we're not going to go. They're going to continue it. So just to keep hearing that,
Hmm.
it was just like a roller coaster, up and down, up and down.
Hmm.
And I was
Hmm.
basically tired of it. Once June hit and they stopped it, just said we weren't going to have a trial, that's when I'm like, okay, now they're going to see a whole nother side of me. I told Joseph that too. I was like, now I've been patient. It's time for me to act out a little bit
Hmm.
because this is not
Yeah.
right.
Well, and so many people, again, the bringing it back to the silver lining, if there is one, throughout this whole thing, is that again, so many people have heard your mother's voice for the first time, have heard, have gotten to know her for the first time, as maybe not as well as you do, of course, Stephanie, but as well as you, as a stranger can know somebody. What do you have to share with people who may be listening to this podcast, who have come to really care about your mother, and maybe people who have read Joseph's article, who have come to care about your mother? What do you have to say to the audience?
Um, I just want to thank them like for their support. Thank them for being interested in the story about my mom, and any love they've showed towards my mom. I just want to thank everyone for that. Basically, and thank Joseph because without Joseph, I think it probably wouldn't have got some of the, I guess, as far who's to say we might still be going to court. I'm not saying we would or
Mm,
would not, but in a way, I felt like they put a lot of fuel to the fire, should I say. And I just thank everyone. I thank everyone that loved her, and we throw love back. We embrace
mm.
everyone that loved my mom, truly. And we thank them.
Thank you for saying that, Stephanie. I want to say that it was there was fuel on the fire, and it was little drops in the bucket. Liam, you're one of those drops in the bucket. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it all made a difference. I really believe it did. You know, any little comment about Betty, that it was like that ripple effect, that suddenly things were in motion. Suddenly things were in motion once I think uh, once I think people saw just how serious Stephanie was, and just how much people. I think we're reminded how much we can care about a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Liam, you and I have never met Betty. We'll never meet Betty. But that's not going to stop us from making sure that she gets the love and justice and RESPECT, as Aretha would sing, that Betty very, very much deserves. And if I can add one thing, because I know we have to wrap soon, Liam, and but before we go, I just want to say one thing. I've been introduced to people I would have never known otherwise. And, I just got a message from Jerry, the fabric store owner, saying, "Hey, I hope you had a good Christmas." A
Oh,
really nice note.
cool.
I've got Stephanie's home number. We chat sometimes. So, we've got Anthony, the record store fanatic, the vinyl collector. I still talk to. I met people who I would have never met otherwise, and even Liam Collins, but we the three of us are not. My point is. My crime over wine point is this, and then Joseph and Adil, shut the heck up. My point is this: the three of us would not be sitting here right now if it weren't for Betty Willis. I
Mm.
wish we weren't sitting here right now, but we met through Betty. So there's something, not to get too deep. I know we're deep in our wine and our crime and over on time, but my point is that I just think there is something really special about the fact that we've been connected through one woman, one woman's voice. Here we are, like, connected, and we can forever, talk about Betty, and keep her legacy very, very, very much alive.
Mm.
It's funny you say that because I'm like, I always say that her music, and whenever when someone hears it, they're like, "Oh, I love your music. I listen." I'm like, okay, then you know my mom. I always tell them because if you listen to her music, you know her. I was like,
Mm.
you'll know my mom. She's just always been a
Yeah.
very good person, good heart, and her music, she put it in her music. So that's a
Mm.
blessing.
Yeah. And that's it's a beautiful music, also, of course. And that's it. It always strikes me, the ripple effect too, right? And it's not just us three, sitting around talking about Betty. It's all the thousands of people who are listening to this episode, the thousands of people, maybe even more so, who have read, Joseph's article, and they all will, hopefully talk about your mother, and share your mother's music more,
Mhm.
with people who didn't listen to the episode, didn't read the article. And I think that's really special, and that's really the special part about what I do here and what Joseph does in his work, and what Stephanie, you've been doing, through no desire of your own, I'm sure, over the last 6 years,
Right.
to spread your mother's story. And I think that's really special. And I just have to say, before we go, or ask, here, Stephanie, it's over, question mark, right? I mean, we got the conviction, we got what we've been asking for.
Right.
But what's next for you, right? I mean, at the end of the day, right, Joseph and I can walk away from this and be okay, but you have to live with this. What's next
Um,
for you? What's on the horizon here?
Basically, just enjoying life, healing from this, every day, like I told you, it's still hard, even after 6 years, I wake up every day, 4 a.m. It's not like nonstop. It's like an alarm. Like And I always say, time heals. So to way to heal is to smile, enjoy life. And that's what my mom
Hmm.
wanted, to just enjoy life, to enjoy the grandbabies, because she loved the grandbabies. Believe that. She loved that she was a great, great grandma. Oh my God. So I just always go by with how she taught me. Just be happy, enjoy life. You only get one life, so enjoy it.
True.
I just want to say thanks to Stephanie. I thank Liam for facilitating this and doing this, but it took Stephanie to be here, and I just want to point out Stephanie's been very selective about who she talks to and who she shares
Yeah,
her mother's story with, and no other media has spoken with Stephanie other than
and
me,
no one
print.
else
But
will.
this is there you go. This is the first audio we've ever heard of Betty's daughter, and
Only Joseph. If you Joseph calls me like, "Here, cool. What do you think?" I'm like, "Okay. What do you think, Joseph?" Other than that, I'm like, "No, I don't want to do it." That's why I had him here today. He's like, "Do you feel comfortable with me being there?" I'm like, "Yep, you have to be there. I will not do it." Yeah, and I want to thank you, Liam, for being interested in doing this. I really appreciate it. I really do. And my mom appreciates it.
Well, I'm honored to be able to do it. So thank you so much for that, Stephanie. And that I just have to say, with that being said, that's all that we have for you this week. So thank you again, Joseph and Stephanie, for coming on and doing this, and Joseph for coming on for like the umpteenth time to do this. And we will just have to see you all this coming Wednesday for your regularly scheduled episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.